Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. First of all, let me say, I promise to try to keep this week's show shorter than last week's. If you're just joining us for the first time and this is the first time you're hearing my podcast and you didn't listen to last week's show, well, let me highly recommend it. It was on herbal antivirals. Those are herbs you can use to help treat viruses. And a very popular show. Packed a lot of information into it. Been very well received. I've gotten a lot of great feedback off of it. In the age of COVID, really, really important to know about antiviral herbs that we can use to treat ourselves. And I promised this week I would talk a little bit about herbal antibiotics. Antibiotics kill germs, basically. Antivirals help kill viruses. So a lot of people confuse those two things. I've actually already done a very thorough podcast on herbal antibiotics under the topic of disinfecting wounds. It was herbs to help disinfect and treat wounds. Well, in that podcast, I covered antiseptic herbs as well as antibiotic herbs. And that was episode 52. Now, episode 52, Herbs that Disinfect Wounds, we talked about birch trees. You can find that on my podcast under Southern Appalachian Herbs. Look for show 52. Now, that one actually got overlooked a little bit because that was an episode where I made some fairly controversial political statements. And the upside of that is those fairly controversial political statements were apparently agreed upon by a great many people, and it brought a whole lot of new listeners to my show when I actually thought by not holding my tongue, as I put it, I might jeopardize my listenership. So it's great to know, y'all, that we're somewhat on the same page, or at least we can respect different opinions. But today I'm just going to run through just a few basic essential antibiotic herbs. And then I'm going to get into another very, relevant COVID related topic, which is herbs for the lungs. COVID is a respiratory virus. It hits the lungs, pneumonia, pleurisy, real bad congestion, coughing. These herbs we talk about today will address that subject, and really important because the means by which it causes your demise is pneumonia or usually a blood clot. And as we discussed last week, aspirin is actually incredibly effective. So if we can find some herbs that are antivirals, if we can find herbs that are antibiotics that can help prevent secondary infections, and we have herbs that are lung supportive, and we have a few blood thinners, well, we can survive this thing. Hopefully, God willing, we can survive this thing. Now, you may notice that I am a little hoarse today. Well, that is just part of late fall in North Carolina. We go from one day where it's, 26 degrees, 30-mile-per-hour cold, icy wind, and 2 days later it's 70 degrees. So, no worries. I've got my mint. I've got, I just ate a handful of juniper berries, just little cones of juniper. Those are both really good antiviral viral antiseptic herbs to try to prevent this from turning into anything worse, right? But then I've also got a tincture of thyme and lobelia, which is an expectorant. We'll talk about that quite a bit here in a few minutes when I get into lung herbs. So before I get into the meat of today's show, which is talking about the antibiotic herbs and the herbs for lung support, let me remind you we are now less than 3 weeks till Christmas. Now, what would make an excellent Christmas gift for the herbalist in your family, for yourself? Everybody likes to buy a little something for themselves. For the prepper, the homesteader, the gardener, the maybe the person you've been trying to talk about, maybe the person who's a little skeptical about herbs. Maybe the person who, thinks Dr. Fauci is science. Okay. A great Christmas gift for those people in your family or for yourself would be my books, right? I've written 3 books. I've got a fourth coming out soon, which I'll be glad to announce pretty soon here. But first book was The Herbs and Weeds of Father Johann Kunzel, co-written with Jolanta Wittip, an Austrian herbalist. Wonderful book on German folk medicine, kitchen medicine. Second book is The Medicinal Trees of the American Southeast. The trees that grow in my region, because I live in such a biodiverse region. I've got the coastal swamps in a couple hours in one direction, and then I'm up here at about 5,000 feet elevation. Unless you're in the desert, the trees that grow in my region pretty much grow all over the country and well up into Canada. And we're talking hundreds of trees that have medicinal uses that will really surprise you. And then my most recent book, Herbal Medicine for Preppers, Homesteaders, and Permaculture People, which is the book I'll be referencing today, where I have this list of lung herbs. They're all very inexpensive. I think they're a great value. My most recent book, Herbal Medicine for Preppers, Homesteaders, and Permaculture People, is an excellent introduction to herbalism as well as for the more advanced herbalist. We cover all the preparations, how to make tinctures and teas and all that. We get into herbs for specific illnesses and injuries, a lot of first aid information, and then, a lot of incorporating herbs into your lifestyle. I hate to toot my own horn, so to speak, but they are good books. I've gotten a lot of really good feedback on them, and I think if you enjoy my podcast, you would really enjoy my books because you get a lot more in a book than I can fit into a little podcast. But paperback and Kindle is available on Amazon, or you can get the ebook directly from my blog, which is southern-appalachian-herbs.blogspot.com. So, in my book, Herbal Medicine for Preppers, Homesteaders, and Permaculture People, I have a big section on the antibiotic and antiseptic antimicrobial herbs. Rather than rehash that, since I already did it in another podcast, I picked up another book that's very good that I didn't write. This is another one you probably want on your shelf. It's Herbal Antibiotics by Stephen Howard Buhner. And in it, he has just a nice little concise guide to a few essential herbs you can have on hand. 15 top antibiotic herbs: acacia, aloe. All right, Cryptolepis is in the Asclepias family. That's in the milkweed family. It is an African herb that you're probably going to have to order. Good to have on hand, though. Specifically good for malaria, Staphylococcus, E. coli. So if you can find that, if you can't, they're a substitute. Echinacea, eucalyptus, garlic, ginger, golden seal, grapefruit seed extract. Another one you're going to have to order probably. Honey. Honey is amazingly antibiotic. It's great for wounds. Juniper, licorice for small periods and small doses. Sage, usnea, and wormwood. All right, so that covers herbal antibiotics. Now let's talk about the lung herbs. There are so many good herbs for lungs. When you're talking about lungs, you could be talking about asthma, you can be talking about congestion, you can be talking colds, pneumonia is very serious. One of the most important things is to keep the lungs open and prevent a lot of congestion from really settling in there. And some of the best things you can do for that are not actually herbs at all. The breathing exercises you can do, singing can help a lot. Just keeping, the lungs expanded, playing a horn like a trumpet, harmonica is shooting a blowgun, and they are so much fun. And they're really not just pea shooters. They can actually be fairly serious weapons. I mean, if you get a 6 or 7 foot piece of aluminum conduit and you make your darts out of nails or old bicycle spokes or what do they call it, music wire. I mean, it's, serious, stiff, sharp stainless steel dart. You can take small game with them at up to probably 50 yards with some practice. And the Native Americans, the Cherokees, were known to be able to kill a man at about 100 yards with a blowgun or even shoot a hummingbird. You know, they're not pea shooters, but you can get some really cool little ones from various shops and online and different places that are, say, quarter-inch diameter aluminum tubes. I have one that actually breaks down to 3 parts, so I can keep it in a little pouch. It just fits together with these little plastic couplings, and the darts came with it and everything. And so I set up a box like maybe 20 yards kind of down the hall, and I'm sitting there listening to one of my favorite podcasts. Hopefully yours is Southern Appalachian Herbs podcast, or I'm watching the news or something. I'll just shoot, 15, 16 darts into that box. I've gotten my groupings down to about a 3 inch diameter, so if the bleep ever really hits the fan around here, the squirrels better look out. But it's great for the lung capacity. It really is, and it is fun. And if you had a family and you want a fun way to keep the lungs open in cases of infection and such, get a dartboard. Get some darts with different colored, like maybe blue and for one and red for the other, and have competitions, target shooting competitions. Just this stuff doesn't have to always be serious. We can have fun with things, but lung issues certainly can be serious. Now, let me tell you, first of all, as someone who inherited asthma, have had really bad lung problems. I've come very close to death many times. I know exactly how serious it can be. Um, After giving up on Western medicine, essentially, I used herbs to treat my asthma, and I do better than I ever did with prescription. In all honesty, I mean, when I was a kid in high school, they had me on so much medication for my asthma that I mean, I was just walking around just out of it all the time. I mean, it was pretty miserable. Actually, a lot of the epinephrine type asthma medications are not that far off from amphetamines. A lot of these asthma medications are strictly controlled because people turn them into crystal meth. And I don't react well to anything that's even slightly amphetamine-like. It gives me a headache. It makes me feel miserable. Makes me very irritable. So I'm a pretty miserable kid on this stuff. And when I started using herbs for my asthma, I got healthier. I got stronger. I got happier. My whole life kind of changed, turned around there. And about the age of 15, I started getting into the herbs for the asthma, and it's made a huge difference. So I cannot recommend strongly enough using herbs as a first resort and pharmaceuticals as a last resort. That said, I would always recommend keeping some like Mucinex on hand, keep that congestion down if it gets serious, especially with viruses like COVID going around. That's kind of my background on it. And the thing is, it used to be like in all the old herb books, all the old medical books, at least older than 50 years old, they talk about asthma in terms of spasmodic asthma. Spasmodic asthma was what everybody had. Well, recently, most kids, and I mean more than half the kids in the United States, have begun developing asthma that is inflammatory asthma. Why is that? Well, I frankly think it's because of all the chemicals in the food we're eating. I mean, a lot of people more on the environmental spectrum will talk about air pollution. We actually have some of the cleanest air in the United States we've had in history. I mean, that may be counterintuitive, but if you think of like old Charles Dickens' time, when everybody was heating with wood and coal, I mean, the air was as black as soot. We have more asthma now than they had then. I think it's chemicals in food. I think it's overprescription of antibiotics that kill the healthy gut bacteria. My asthma improved dramatically, as I discussed last week, when I started using probiotic beverages, kefir kombucha, making my own sauerkraut and my own fermented pickles. The kids in Amish country, they have a much lower instance of asthma, childhood asthma, than those just down the road, basically in the same environment, because those Amish kids are getting more fermented food and drinking raw milk, unpasteurized milk. Their immune systems are healthier, so their bodies aren't overreacting to everything with inflammation. So that's key. You got to start with that. But well beyond that, there are so many herbs that can really help. All right. One I use every day is Dang Shin, Codonopsis. Chinese herb. It's called poor man's ginseng. Again, I discussed that one last week, but it really good to have. It's very lung supportive. It helps with asthma. I can attest. I can tell you personally. Again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not telling you it helps with asthma. I'm saying it helps me with asthma. I've spoken with people who have COPD, and they swear by it. They say it really helps. So lobelia is classic. Lobelia is an herb we use a lot in the Appalachians. It has literally saved my life. I mentioned this story before. I talk about it in my book. Went out for a hike on a yeah, one of those early spring days where it's still snow on the ground, but the temperature is going to get to about 40, and you've been stuck inside all winter and you just want to get out. So it was kind of a spontaneous thing. I was driving by a trail and I just stopped and went. So I did not have a backpack with me. I did not have anything on me that I would normally have going into the woods. And as I'm walking down this trail, I slipped on a wet rock. Everything is very muddy in the mountains about this time of year. You come back with your shoes soaked and your pants soaked up to the knees. Slipped on a wet rock, tumbled down a ravine. I mean, a very steep, what we call a holler in the mountains, into a river. A very cold, probably 30-degree, swift river. And I fought my way out. By the grace of God, I did not hit my head on something and black out. I would have been dead. So I got out of the water. I climbed up, and I mean, just by the fingernails, climbed up this steep slope back to the trail. Got up there, and I'm immediately thinking hypothermia. I'm thinking I got to get back to my truck before I die. Well, I start to hike. The shock of that cold had caused an asthma attack. Sudden change in temperature can trigger an asthma attack. So now I'm facing hypothermia and not being able to move as fast, not being able to breathe as well, and thinking I may not make it. The 5 mile, well, let's say 2 miles. I could not have been more than 2 to 3 miles from the truck. And I'm thinking I might not make it back. Well, it had been just warm enough, and if you don't believe in miracles, trust me, I've experienced enough of them that I do. A good little clearing was there, and the sun had been shining in one spot, and there was a lobelia plant growing. This was, I mean, how weird is this? This was like probably early April in the mountains of North Carolina. Nobody expects to see lobelia growing at that point. Our blue wild lobelia. I just grabbed it and ate the whole thing. My lungs opened up. I got a breath, and I hiked back to the truck, stayed moving so hypothermia didn't set in, got the heater going in that truck right away, and I'm still here today because of the grace of God and one little tiny lobelia plant. Lobelia is an incredibly powerful bronchodilator and expectorant. It's very much in its nature like tobacco. And see, had I been thinking that day, had I grabbed my backpack, I would have had my emergency little chew of burley tobacco on me. Tobacco is a bronchodilator. It opens the lungs. I use it for emergencies. I also use it for bee stings and such. Tobacco is a lifesaver. Natural tobacco. Lobelia is very much the same. And if you take too much, you'll throw up. Well, I didn't even think about that because it was an emergency. I just ate the whole thing. Charles Thompson of the Thomsonian School of Medicine made lobelia one of his primary foundational herbs. And if you have any lung issues, or if you're worried about lung infections and congestion and constriction, grow some lobelia, buy some lobelia, have lobelia on hand. Just like tobacco, it is caustic to the back of the throat. It'll burn your throat. You always want to dilute the tincture a little bit. It can be included with mullein for a smoking mixture to help with lung issues. Believe it or not, sometimes smoking herbs is actually really good for the lungs. Not long term, not regularly, not every day, but it's good stuff. So, lobelia, highly recommended. I consider that a primary. Wild cherry bark is just another great mountain remedy. Used to be in every cough syrup, probably probably every cough syrup available in America. It is not only a good expectorant and helps open the lungs, but it's what we call an antitussive. Wild cherry bark has in it very small amounts of cyanide. Now, okay, yeah, poisonous cyanide, but those very small amounts of cyanide actually calm coughs. At some point, the wild cherry bark in our cough syrups was actually replaced by codeine to do the same thing. Frankly, the small amount of cherry bark, cyanide in cherry bark, is a lot safer than the codeine in a cough syrup. This happened to me once with a prescription cough syrup when I had the avian flu. The avian flu hit my lungs very hard. Yes, I've had all the flus now. So the avian flu hit my lungs very hard to the point that I coughed where I broke a lung. I actually coughed so hard I fractured at least one lung. So that was one of the few times I actually went down to an urgent care center and said, look, I need something for this cough. Well, big mistake, right? I should have known better. I should have gotten some cherry bark. They gave me a cough syrup with codeine that not only stopped the cough, but um, paralyzed my bladder. I could not urinate for several days. That can actually kill you. That is a common side effect of cough syrups that have codeine in them. So, cherry bark, a tincture, a syrup, any way you can get a cherry bark, a decoction, that's a strong tea, a boiled cherry bark, is going to help with that cough. And it's going to be a lot better for you than over the counter cough syrups. The most common OTC cough syrup over the counter contains dextromorphin. Dextromorphin is, it's not dangerous in small amounts. It can be toxic in high amounts. In moderate amounts, it's a hallucinogen, you know. So all of these have their potential side effects, and the natural cherry bark and a little lobelia is probably, well, that's my go-to. I'm not giving you medical advice, but I'm telling you what I do. I'm going to go for wild cherry bark and lobelia. By the way, lobelia is often called Indian tobacco. Like I said, it's very much like tobacco. Mimosa is one that's good. I use it more as an antihistamine. It's a natural antihistamine. Thyme, as I mentioned before, is an expectorant. And I give a lot of details. I mean, I literally have about a half a page on each of these herbs in my book. So again, I'm going to recommend you get the book, Herbal Medicine for Preppers, Homesteaders, and Permaculture People. But thyme is really good. Mullein is, again, one of the go-to lung herbs. Mullein soothes the lungs in any form it's taken, whether smoked or a tea or a tincture. It's expectorant. It's anti-inflammatory for the lungs. It's good for bronchitis, asthma, throat infections, coughs. Just excellent. Father Nape really highly recommended colt's foot. He said it purified the chest and lungs, and he recommended it as a tea, good for asthma and coughs, to remove the congestion from the lungs. Chamomile, that just relaxing chamomile we often give fussy babies. It is really good for colds, but and fevers for gripes, but also for chest congestion. Bitter aloe, it's again one of those that Buhner recommended as an antibiotic. Often very good for chest congestion, and whooping cough specifically. Violets, those wonderful little flowers that just grow wild all throughout the woods. Really good for whooping cough, for any kind of spasmodic cough, for chest congestion, for colds in general, viruses, but also it contains aspirin-like substances, so it helps you feel better as well. But it's really even recommended for coughs for people with tuberculosis. It's one of those old remedies you see a lot for consumption. Almond oil. This is just the oil of almonds. Really good for inflammation and specifically lung inflammation. Common stinging nettles. Nettles are another natural antihistamine, but they help remove phlegm or congestion from the chest. Father Kunzel, in his book, Herbs and Weeds, said everything on this plant is used, from the roots to the seeds. The roots boiled in vinegar is by far the best remedy for hair growth. Yeah, they actually say it helps you from going bald. The herb cleanses the lungs, stomach, and intestines and has a healing effect when used for a longer time on gastric and intestinal ulcers. In this case, it's best prepared with plantain and juniper and thyme. So another one of those just really common formulas. Lime tree blossoms. Now, this is linden. This is what we call basswood in America. Really good for coughs, congestion, and obstruction of the lungs and windpipe. St. John's wort, which is also an antiviral, is really good for obstruction of the lungs, phlegm, even nasal congestion. Wild angelica is one we use in all cough syrups in the mountains of Appalachia, in the Appalachian Mountains, in the Blue Ridge. Wild angelica is probably not recognized as being as good an herb as it really is. Um, Angelica is good for phlegm, it's good for congestion of the lungs and chest, it's good for clearing the windpipes. It's just a very soothing, slightly expectorant herb. Pimpinella is especially recommended for hoarseness and congestion, catarrh of lungs, all pulmonary catarrh. Masterwort, often used as a tea or infused in wine, is really good for clearing mucus from the lungs and really all pulmonary complaints. All parts of the plantain, even the seeds, which are actually the psyllium that we usually think of as a laxative, all parts of the plantain are good for clearing the lungs, getting the mucus out, and soothing the whole respiratory system. Juniper, as I've said before, juniper is an excellent expectorant. Juniper is antiviral, antiseptic, antibiotic. Juniper is one of the go-to herbs. Wormwood, the whole family, like the sweet Annie we talked about last week, that is strongly antiviral, to common wormwood, southernwood. This actually is our American white sage. Mugwort is also in that family. Excellent for the lungs, excellent antiviral, antiseptic, antibiotic. And Father Kunzel actually gave a really nice formula. If you happen to have these on hand, he recommended this for all types of lung patients. And from that, he meant people with just, pneumonia, pleurisy, a little congestion from a cold to flu. He would have put COVID in this category, to tuberculosis. He recommended 3 handfuls of juniper twigs. Now, this is the twigs, not the berries. 3 handfuls of plantain. It's a lot of herbs, but you're making a big formula here. So 3 handfuls of juniper twigs, 3 handfuls of plantain, a handful of nettles, dried, of course, not fresh. This goes for all these herbs. A handful of St. John's wort, 3 handfuls of angelica. Um, I assume he means the roots. He does not specify, but the roots are the part of the plant we usually use. A handful of mullein, 1 handful of ground ivy, 1 handful of peppermint, a half handful of anise and fennel, a handful of Iceland moss. Now, we don't have Iceland moss here. A little bit of usnea would be a very good substitute for that. 1 handful of speedwell, 2 handfuls of real lungwort. Lungwort is a lung herb. This one I had not mentioned before, but it definitely deserves mention. Lungwort is a very popular, common herb in European herbalism. We need to grow it ourselves in our garden. Half handful of arum leaves, half handful of danewort roots, and a half handful of burnet roots. He recommends making a formula of that, boiling it all down, simmering it, making a strong tea, and just having people sip on that a little at a time throughout the day. Also, spruce. A lot of your trees, pine, spruce, very good expectorants. The spruce or the ABs, really good to have on hand for flus, colds. They help break a fever and clear the lungs. So, those are some good remedies. And remember, if you don't have these on hand now, we do not know what's coming with economic disruptions from these COVID variants and 100 other things. I recommend stocking up on them now, getting the seeds to grow them in the garden, getting some field guides so you can recognize them in the wild, and preparing now while we can. I'm not a doomsday type of person. I'm not one that thinks the world is coming to an end. I always say don't freak out. Expect the best, but prepare for the worst. Keep your head up, keep a good positive attitude. That'll do more for your immune system than just about anything. But have some common sense about you. Have on hand what you need or know how to find it if you can't go to your regular store, your regular doctor, or whatever to get it. So y'all have a great week. Remember, my books make excellent Christmas gifts, and I will see you next week when hopefully I will be in slightly better voice.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.